I seen, but could not make them fit. She uses the word fit a lot, and the word fit was often used to describe an epileptic episode. She has sort of taken that word and used it in many, many ways. The thought behind I strove to join unto the thought before, but sequence rattled out of sound, like balls upon the floor. You can see falling yard just blowing away. But I felt it cleaving in her first line that was incredible.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Good artists, whether it's painters or musicians or poets, novelists, the first line in a poem, the first line is the beginning of the frame. It shuts it off. The wounded deer leaps highest is one of her first lines. I mean, it's just like when I drive to Santa Rosa almost every morning about 9 o'clock, you get Mozart in the morning in the classic. And how does Mozart start almost all the time? And then we're going to get into he's going to cut you off from the rest of the world and get you into this world of the art piece. And I think that's what's going on. What happens to us with poetry, we know this is true in paintings, we've got to get inside the frame. But with poetry, what happens to us, we think we have to be talked to. We have to understand some kind of a logical possession of thought, and that happens. But what the first line does is mark off that whole world out there from the world of the poem and invite you into that world, setting aside your own world for the time being and just living in that world. And you may or may not understand it at first, or ever. But if it's a good poem, which you got so many of them, it's worth the trouble. That's it. And it'll make you a better person.
I can tell a little story. My first exploration of Emily Dickinson happened a year after I graduated from college. And I was a biology major, so I had no English major in my history. And I was going to spend the summer in Hawaii. And I thought, as long as I'm spending the summer there with my brothers, I should take a course at the university. And I found a course on Emily Dickinson. So you had to petition to get in, and I finally got in. And what I chose to do, this was a variant of George Anderson's book, Stairway to Surprise. He ended up with all of our work. I found out then that professors take the work of their students and make books out of it. So this was a course on Emily Dickinson, and I chose a small poem, like 8 lines, and I wrote my paper. We had to hand it in halfway through, and I was used to getting pretty good grades in my classes. And I got it back, and it said, I'm sure you'll be able to make this into a passable paper. What I did, what I wanted to share with you is, I went home with this 8-line poem, and I spent 3 days doing nothing but reading this poem, literally. I mean, I just immersed myself in this poem. I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and all of a sudden it exploded. And I wrote a paper that got honors. But it did not happen right away. That's the first time I ever had that kind of experience of just immersing myself in those lines. Are you going to tell us the poem? I would if I could remember. I still have the paper. This is a long time ago.
One of the lines.
What's the first line that gets the phrase?
What was it that kept you at it? Was there something in there that was grabbing you, then you just couldn't identify it?
I had to know what it was I was missing, because obviously he thought I had not reached the nugget of the poem, or he would have said so.
So in other words, it was an okay poem for a while, and then all of a sudden it was this.
All of a sudden, yes, all of a sudden it had dimensions that I had not imagined, and they were right there. And once I saw that, and this is 8 lines, and I thought, surely I got everything I could out of it, but I was not an English major. I didn't know how you had to work at these things, but I found out.
haiku.
Yes, yes, I love that one too. You could just sit and read them.
Ukiah as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. I found the Heisenberg lines. Perception of an object costs precisely the object's loss. Heisenberg believed that if the person who studied the object, whatever the object was, altered the object itself. And this is what she's saying. Perception of an object costs precisely the object's loss. So it changes with the observation. And she understood that before
Yeah.
her.
Want to do a nice little joyful poem before we get into the heavier ones?
What page?
The one at the bottom of page 2, under the quote from Higginson, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, who was the editor of the Atlantic Monthly, finally went to Amherst and met Emily Dickinson in 1870, and he writes back to his wife that she finds ecstasy in living, the mere sense of living is joy enough. We have other quotes from that meeting as well, I believe. But this, I mean, if this one isn't just a pure joy poem, except maybe right at the end. But, I taste a liquor never brewed, from tankards scooped in pearl. Not all, actually that's wrong. It should be not all the vats along the Rhine. I don't know, I copied that one out and got it. In fact, what I did, I went to Google, and rather than having to type it all myself, they put somebody else, somebody
Okay,
Sit
say
around
it
with
the
your
way it's
phone.
supposed to be again.
I taste the liquor never brewed, from tankards scooped in pearl. Not all the vats along the Rhine yield such an alcohol. Ever drink Rhine wine? They've got it right in this little book. Inebriate of air am I, and debauchee of dew. You debauch in the dew. Reeling through endless summer days from inns of molten blue. When landlords turned the drunken bee out of the foxglove's door, when butterflies renounce their drams, I shall but drink the more, till seraphs swing their snowy hats, and saints to windows run, to see the little tippler leaning against the sun. Drunk with life. Maybe at the end, leaving this world. That last line I've pondered about. Is that just kind of a joyous exultation of going up to the sun? The sun was sun and brightness in the summer are often kind of symbolic of joy and happiness and brightness for maybe we've done enough about, just for a kick, the number 1432, the last line of the last little piece, just above the one we read, spurn the temerity, rashness and cavalry, gayward Gethsemane, knew we of thee. That is the kind of thing she would write to a friend begging for a letter. This one happened to go to Helen Hunt Jackson. She hated it when her friends were not, and she was always writing letters, and her friends, nobody could write them a letter, and she did. And she got upset with them when they didn't, especially these ones that she was in love with. And so she would, the poem above, my friend must be a bird because it flies. I've been writing you, and she would write 2 or 3 letters, and if she got any back, she would be lucky sometimes. So, anyway, this is...
How do we have all of her letters? Did she...
They're also...
No, but I mean, did she make duplicates, or did everybody save gave them and they were all correct?
Yeah. She did have some duplicates, maybe some of them weren't sent, but you go to the attics of New England, apparently, and the people who had, according to Richard Sewell, we have left maybe half to three-quarters of her poems and 1/10 of her letters. And her letters are published by the same fellow who did the poems, Johnson, 3 volumes.
Well, there's this one, which is her letters to Susan.
Yeah, just that.
Just this one volume. Well, and many of her letters are poems.
And Susan.
Her letters are magnificent. Her letters are worth reading.
And you can see her own handwriting.
That's how they dated the poem. Is that though a lot of those poems were, a lot of the final copies were written after the poems were written. So the dating is really funny. But one of the things they did was look at the handwriting of the poem and compare it with the dated letter. And that way they could come in with something. There's a lot of arguments about the dates of letters, and I don't know whether I would want to argue on that basis for very much, but it's done. Anyway,